Typical jerk neighbors complain about the truck in my yard, so I replace it. I live in a mostly quiet neighborhood with lots of snowbirds and weekenders because of the proximity to a lake. The year-rounders are mostly retired and people generally get along fine. A couple years ago, neighbors on one side built a new garage and driveway, moving their cars much closer to my existing forsythia hedge. I love the forsythia in the spring and basically let it grow however it likes so I can have the bright yellow flowers. Almost immediately they started complaining that the hedge blocked their view as they backed out of their driveway. In my state, neighbors have no right to a view extending over someone else's property. And our Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that as long as trees and bushes do not actually impinge onto the roadway, property owners have no obligation to trim for visibility. I keep a 5-foot strip mowed between my hedge and the road, perfectly reasonable to my way of thinking. Since they have no recourse hedges, they instead complain to county code enforcement about anything else they can think of. My brother parked his licensed and insured project truck on my property a while back because he was in the process of moving and needed a spot for it while he was figuring things out. In the meantime, he was in a bad accident in another vehicle and the truck has been sitting for over a year now. The license plate recently expired, and I got a letter from the county with threats of fines if it wasn't removed. Cue the malicious compliance. My brother decided to sell the truck for scrap and had it towed away this morning. This gave my neighbors their temporary victory as they observed from their deck, and nearly 6 inches of improved view from their driveway. At least until I moved my second vehicle, a 1960 Lincoln, which is about 2 feet longer than the truck, with current plates and insurance, into that place this afternoon. As a single person with more than one vehicle, I may get around to driving that old car at least once more before winter. A guy the first work with had an old truck with a dump bed for his side jobs of tree removal. It was pretty beat up looking but it had current tags and he used it every weekend. His neighbors constantly complained about it being an eyesore and they wanted him to park it somewhere they couldn't see it. They live in the mountains. No law and no rules about where you can park on your own property, so he just kept it where he wanted it. One day his neighbor came over and got nasty with him about it. So he painted a giant middle finger on the dump bed and raised it up so it was pointed right at their house. Maybe next time they will mind their own business. Same with an WA a friend of mine lives in. He had a work truck with his biz name on it and would park it in his driveway. Rules of WA are no vehicles with logos to be parked after 9 p.m. or some crap. It was like a 2-year-old gorgeous truck that wouldn't fit in his garage. So he bought a POS 85 truck rusted to shit and back. No bed. Don't think it even had side windows. His business was only like a mile from his house, so he would drive there, get his nice truck out of the biz garage, and then drive the POS back home at the end of the day. Tagged and insured, so nothing they could do about it. Even made it a point to park it on the street in front of the Karen. My dude. Replace the car with a big OLRV. Now add a large colorful flag on a pole to the edge of your hedge. You know, for decoration. I have a 1967 Mustang in my driveway, but it currently doesn't run. Hasn't run for a little over 10 years actually. It was my mom's. She never got around to fixing it. Then just shifted that burden onto me. I never planned to get rid of it because it's way too cool. I just haven't been able to get the funds together to fix it. Anyways, a handful of people would constantly badger me about wanting to buy it. And I always refused. I never intend to sell that car basically. Well, one of the people I repeatedly turned away turned me into the city compliance. And I got a letter in the mail saying I had 30 days to comply or they'd tow it. My options were basically get rid of it, or show it could actually move. The issue is that it had been sitting for like 5 years without ever moving. Well, I read through the entire city ordinance about cars, and found that because it's a classic car, all I actually had to do was block it from view somehow. Options included putting it behind a fence or gate, putting it in a garage, or, as I verified with code compliance, putting a tarp over it. I don't have a garage, and I don't really want to block my driveway with a fence and gate. So I bought a $20 tarp and now nobody can do anything about it. And I'm sure the view of a crappy-looking tarp is way more appealing than a beautiful classic car. Side benefit is I get fewer people knocking on my door asking about it. Have you considered buying an old school bus? Oh, and because it's no longer used for school transportation, you would have to repaint it. How does day glow pink sound? But only on one side of the bus. Once a week move it forward or back a couple of feet. That way you truthfully say, I've started and have moved the vehicle once a week. It is not an abandoned vehicle. And so self-unaware that they created the problem themselves. It boggles me how people feel they get to complain about what other people do on their own private property as long as it stays within those boundaries. Unlike, say, loud noise. You just reminded me of when I got a notice in the mail from our city to remove the junk vehicle from our yard. It was my vehicle. That was my car. That I drove almost every day. It was a 1989 Nissan Sentra. I had to start parking it in different spots so they'd know it moved. Jerks. Macking my poor old man out to be a junker. To be fair, it did end up being scrapped like 4 months later when the transmission kicked the bucket. During rush hour. 60 miles from home. Between exits that are about 16 miles apart on the interstate that is so lovingly nicknamed the Corridor of Death. In a construction zone. A very nice construction worker helped me get it off the highway and saw me cry while I waited for my mom. Ah, old Red. Such a fucking nightmare of a car. I loved him so. Rip. Isas. Man. Best $500 I ever spent. Our neighbor reported us to the city for having ugly cars in our driveway. She was referring to a 2001 Tacoma, a 2002 Audi Allroad, and a 1970 BMW 2800 centi-seconds. Granted, the BMW is in the process of being restored, so it's not super pretty right now, but it's far less unsightly than the 1999 GMC Safari minivan she drives. On the one hand, well done. On the other, it's a shame that Lincoln outside. Mark 5? As a former collector of antique military trucks, I can empathize. Current registration, insurance, and a history vehicle tag on a 22 KLB's truck. And neighbor wanted to complain. Neighbor discovered that the town supervisor had a military jeep given a showroom grade restoration by a fellow club member. Time to get that pontoon boat up on a trailer. Them having temporary victory is the best and makes the revenge so much sweeter when it all comes crashing down. Put Christmas lights on it and call it art. We had the WA called on us because we had our third vehicle parked on the street. Fully licensed, insured and in working order. Ridiculous. The license plate recently expired, and I got a letter from the county with threats of fines if it wasn't removed. If it's parked on your driveway and not on public streets, driven. What right do they have to complain about the tags? That car needs headers and an Italian tune-up every weekend, I think. At least they didn't take it upon themselves to trim your bushes. I've got a Forsythia, honeysuckle, boxwood hedge down my driveway that's along the property line. One of the neighbors decided to cut them back. And also some small hardwoods. These plants were clearly on my land. They wanted a flatter yard. So they brought in more dirt and also redid the gutter drains. Right to the property line. I called the city. And they sent someone out while they were still grading. Inspector said it was allowable. And I'm left with this. https imager.com/a/dp7sky7. I know a couple of my neighbors look down on me because my garden isn't as pristine as theirs, and they're not keen on my motorcycles and cars. Despite most of them being behind the 6-feet-high gates and only one being on the drive in front of the gates, and another on the road in front of my house. And both cars that are visible are complete, running well, in good condition, fully licensed, taxed and legal and regularly used. I acquired some land a few years ago, and on it are 2 Unimog 404s, which to many would be scrap, but to me, are just basket cases needing careful restoration. I don't really have the space to work on them. But if I did, it would need to be the drive in front of the gates. For all the world to see. The temptation is strong.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. PipeOrganTransplant is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.